We still have kids having dreams that Kivalina is flooding, that Kivalina is getting washed out.
Experts on erosion say Kivalina could be one storm season away from destruction. Coming up on Frontiers, navigating an uncertain future. And across the state, the loss of permafrost has some expensive consequences. A look at the challenges and some of the ways communities are adapting to climate change.
Sponsorship for Frontiers with Rhonda McBride is provided by Kupik Corporation and Spinard Builders Supply. Alaska, where there are old triumphs, but also new frontiers, with challenges as great as the state itself, but a belief the best is yet to come, bringing you the faces, the places, and the spirit of the last frontier. This is Frontiers with Rhonda McBride.
Welcome to our program. Alaska's changing climate may be one of the most challenging frontiers our state has ever faced, a threat that grows every year. Perhaps one of the most alarming examples is in Kivalina, a shrinking strip of land that's home to about 450 people. Well, Emily Carlson spent some time there to see what life is like in a community with a very uncertain future.
Yeah, it's like life is in limbo there, Rhonda. When President Obama became the first sitting president to visit the Arctic in September, he spoke about Kivalina, and that put the tiny village on the map. Kivalina is about 80 miles north of Kotzebue, which is the gateway to the Arctic. Yet it has seen the negative effects of climate change for decades. Now that the president and the world knows its plight, the community thought that help would be on the way. But nearly 3 months later, that hope is quickly fading.
Kivalina is half the size it was 60 years ago. Sea ice no longer shelters it from storms. Now warmer, the Arctic Ocean melts the protective barrier.
It is shrinking because of erosion.
Lucy Adams keeps the Inupiat tradition of crimping mucklucks alive.
You have to have strong hands. That's why my hands always blister one by one.
Without animals, it will be hard to pass on her knowledge to the next generation.
That's a ring seal. They turn out only in midwinter. If it's warm, they won't turn out.
When I tap you, sit down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Here at the school,
9, sit down.
the challenges of climate change can be found in the number of students
When you're sharing a book,
in Emma Norton's class.
we only have 12 books, and there's 13 first graders and 16 second graders. So,
The second grade teacher is sick, so Emma has more kids than usual.
how many of you have ever had a pumpkin in your house?
There are no substitute teachers in Kivalina. It's hard to get teachers to move here.
There were 3 kids on a four-wheeler, and I came around the corner with 2 of our other brand new teachers, and the first thing out of one of the kids, we're like, oh, hey, we're new teachers, who are you? Oh, you might as well just get back on a plane. Everybody leaves us anyway.
Emma got over her first day and quickly realized the kids are too cramped to learn.
We were willing to give up a teacher's lounge so the kids could have a classroom. But we desperately, desperately need a school.
The McQueen School is 200% over capacity, more than 40 years old, and it shows. One portable classroom wasn't enough. The playground was demolished for another. Now there's funding to pay for a brand new school, but here's the problem.
No room to grow. Got water on all sides.
Take a walk around this thin barrier island, and it's easy to see. Kivalina is getting smaller every day. Temporary protection holds up the land near the airstrip, but eventually the whole village will be lost to erosion. In 2004, 20-foot waves crashed into Kivalina. There was widespread flooding. Several homes were nearly lost in the storm.
Oh yeah, we still have kids having dreams that Kivalina is flooding, that Kivalina is getting washed out.
There's no plumbing in Kivalina because no one wants to invest in an island that likely won't exist in a decade. People haul drinking and bathing water from the washateria.
It's very unhealthy for us to work in this kind of environment, but we managed to survive.
And they still use honey buckets. Sanitary conditions
This was our wash basin.
are no better here than some third world countries. Entire families wash in the same small bowl.
We do worry about getting sick because we're just reusing that water, reusing and reusing.
Most everyone here wants to move, but the state and the federal government won't pay for it. And on top of that, there's no agreement on where to go.
It's right there, this first mountain right there, the beginning of this chain of mountains.
But many people want to move inland, where the new school will be built.
7.5 miles.
But Lucy says that's too far from the ocean. And from the seal, she needs to keep her culture alive.
3 elders was trying to tell them it's swampy around it. They say when the reindeer herd, reindeers used to fall down and disappear in swamps.
When we were younger, this is
Millie Hawley,
because we lived on.
the tribal president, was counting on the new school to unite the community. But again, there's a big problem.
$40 million for the causeway right here. It's about a mile, less than a mile.
The school funding does not include money for a road to get there.
I would love to be in a new school, and that's part of the reason I've been hanging on is I want to see the new school. Who knows when that's ever going to happen.
In the meantime, Emma does the best she can with what she has.
What's another word for cover? Did, hid, or lid?
But how do you explain to 6-year-olds why it's taking so long?
The kids already ask, are you coming back? Are you coming back next year? And it's hard to think that one day they'll be, no, gotta go. Raise your hand and tell me. Oh, not photocopy, photosynthesis. Say it.
And how do you tell them you won't be around to see what happens?
It's gonna be really hard when I eventually do decide to leave and go somewhere else, and I wish I could like scoop them up all and take them with me. This feeds the plant.
These kids could become the first climate change refugees in the United States. They play on an island that may not exist when they grow up. To them, uncertainty has become a way of life.
So you may be asking, it seems pretty hopeless there. Why do people stay in Kivalina? Millie Hawley told me she would have moved a long time ago, but as tribal president, she's staying for her community. While some have left, others still have hope that they'll figure something out. This month, Millie is meeting with a handful of agencies, including the state, the borough, NANA, FEMA, just to name a few, Rhonda, to see what they can figure out for the future.
So if they do get the money to build the road to the school, then what?
The hope is that people will start moving on their own with the money that they have. They'll get some people to go, and then they'll figure something out from there. Hopefully some funding will come through.
Well, I have to ask, because you and Carolyn Hall stayed there for a full week.
We did.
And that really gives you a sense of things. A lot of times as journalists, we run in and out of a community. What was that like?
It was great to get to know the community. When you run in and out, you don't get to know the people, and we stayed at the school. There's no hotel in Kivalina. We brought our own sleeping bag. We slept on the floor. We ate the school lunch. But it was great because we got to know the kids. They would show up early to school to hang out with us, to talk to us, and we got a sense of their fears, uncertainty of the future, but also the joy that they have every day. And they are happy kids. They show up to school, they love school, they plan whatever they can because there's no playground, but they're still kids. They still have a sense of playfulness.
Well, that's great to see. Well, thanks very much, Emily. It was a great piece to give us a feel for what things are like there. Well, Kivalina is not alone. Many communities across our state with dealing with the consequences of a warmer climate. When we come back, we'll talk with two people who are helping dozens of communities cope with thawing permafrost and erosion.
At Spinard Builder Supply, we know it takes a lot of ingredients to get it just right. That's why we have design centers in every store to personalize the most important rooms in your home. We'll help you select cabinets, faucets, and appliances that fit your style. So all you have to worry about is how much oregano goes in Mom's pasta sauce. Spinard Builder Supply. Building for life.
Visit our design experts today and receive 15% off select kitchen cabinets. Now through November 30th.
The Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium provides comprehensive health services for Alaska Native and American Indian people across our state. In addition to world-class care at the Alaska Native Medical Center, our work delivers health services for rural Alaska. From cutting-edge technology for the best care possible, to modern construction of clean water systems and health clinics, to health training and outreach that honors our culture, our vision is that Alaska Native people are the healthiest people in the world.
We have a story of 27 families that put 18 months of their lives into building a village, a home for themselves and their future. Our Inupiaq culture goes back thousands of years, carried by a strong sense of community. Our relationship with our natural surroundings is at the heart of our culture. By investing in future generations through development that is balanced with the love of our land, the Kupi Corporation brings together traditions of the past with visions of the future.
There's an old saying, everybody complains about the weather, though nobody does anything about it. Well, you can't blame a guy for trying. We know you can't change the weather, but you can change the way you look at it. And while you can study all the models you want, eventually, you're gonna have to go outside. Carlos Fora and KTVA 11 weather. Be there.
The effects of a warming climate vary from place to place, which makes it hard to come up with a one-size-fits-all solution. Well, our guests have seen some of the challenges firsthand at various communities around our state. And joining us, Mike Black with the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium. Now, you also headed up the climate change sub-cabinet in the Sarah Palin administration. And we also have Robin Bronin joining us. She's with the Alaska Institute for Justice, which has been looking at climate change as a human rights issue. So first of all, since we just saw that story about Kivalina, ANTHC has been working with that community. Can you give us an update on some of the things you're doing?
Well, Kivalina has been, just recently, we've put a prototype for an in-house sanitation system into 9 homes there that rely upon rainwater catchment to augment the water supply. And then we also have a separate toilet, which basically separates the solid and liquid waste streams, and that makes it a much more manageable issue instead of a traditional honey bucket. We're hoping that this will be able to provide us with better health and certainly more convenience to the homeowner.
So it's kind of a win-win. You're not going to have to spend the money for infrastructure that may not necessarily be needed if they have to move.
That's right, and it's designed so that it can move with the home. If the homes are relocated, then that unit could be brought along with them.
So let's talk a little bit about sort of overall in the Arctic. We have seen temperatures go up, but only by a few degrees. So why is that such a big deal?
Well, it may seem like a few degrees, but what we find in the northern and western parts of the state is that they are entirely reliant upon permafrost as their structure for their buildings and for the roads and so forth. And when that permafrost is around 28, 29, 30 degrees, if you see a 4 degrees change, suddenly that ice is no longer ice, it's water. And with that, all the structural strength of that ground is lost.
So how is that affecting the tundra overall, the landscape?
Well, the landscape is changing rapidly, and as you can see, in this picture, you can see the dried tundra ponds, as well as tundra ponds that actually have water. The reason they have water is because the ice lens is continuous below below the water bodies. If that breaks apart, as you see in some of those empty craters, almost look like craters to you, well, the ice has melted, it's cracked, it's allowed the water to escape, and the water no longer is on the surface. That's a particular issue if the community is relying upon the tundra ponds to be an actual water source.
And it seems like water sources are particularly affected by rivers.
Well, rivers are something we rely upon as well as tundra ponds, but rivers obviously are a much more reliable source of water. The problem is when we get permafrost degrading, it suddenly will, as in this case, create a thermokarst, which is a massive failure of the ice to hold the soil in place. And then it washes out into the river, and then the water itself becomes sediment laden. And with that, we have the additional issue of trying to filter water before we can actually use it for human purposes.
More water, but I guess sometimes your water plants are actually suffering from permafrost shifting.
Well, that's another issue, as we actually, as you can see in this photograph in NOAATAC, the whole foundation is slumping, and with that, the entire structure that's holding pipes in place is starting to fail. Now, this can create an enormous issue. Obviously, the piping could fail completely and the water source or the water treatment be lost. In this case, what we're trying to do in NOAATAC is actually monitor this and then refreeze the ground using an active refrigeration unit.
And I've heard that, you know, you might look at things like solar panels to do this, or wind.
That would be an elegant solution. If we can use solar panels, because the failure of the permafrost is occurring in the summertime, that's when obviously solar energy would be most available. If we use the solar panels to run a chiller, then it would be a way of keeping that ground frozen and intact.
So you have to come up with all kinds of adaptations that we never imagined.
I think that's the big lesson, is that we need to rethink entirely the engineering of our infrastructure, and we need to be innovative and certainly attentive to what's changing so that we can preserve as much as we can.
You know, Robin, I want to go to you a little bit because you've worked on the human rights issue. You know, a lot of people say right off the bat, gosh, this costs so much money. Why don't we just move people out rather than try to rebuild that infrastructure? Or they'll say, I'm not paying for that.
Well, a couple of things. The reason why this is a human rights issue is because the people, particularly in these coastal communities that are being forced to relocate, have done the least to contribute to the carbon emissions that are now causing our temperatures to increase as much as they are. And the second piece about this is that this is not only going to be an issue for Alaska. This is an issue for coastal communities all over the world, including the East Coast. I'm originally from New York, and I was there when Hurricane Sandy happened, and they don't have any strategies for protecting Lower Manhattan. So what's happening here is really relevant to the rest of the world.
So who's going to pay for this? I mean, what should happen?
Well, the part of the challenge is we have no government agency in the United States that has the mandate to figure out how to relocate communities. And so without that governance mandate, there's no funding readily available for relocation. But the other problem is the laws that we currently have are anachronistic for climate change impacts, like our disaster legislation, which does not include erosion and sea level rise. So there's funding readily available for disasters.
In other words, a community has to be wiped out before they get money.
Well, they have to be, there has to be a hurricane, flooding, some sort of an extreme weather event that's specifically designated in the federal legislation. And climate change impacts like erosion and sea level rise are not included. The second part is that disaster legislation pretty much mandates that you have to repair and rebuild in the place of the disaster. And so there's no mechanism, even if government agencies and the community want to use those resources to relocate, to make that funding available for relocation. So the funding is a red herring. It's not a funding issue.
Well, Mike, what do you think should be done? You know, how you were on the climate change sub-cabinet in the Palin administration, which kind of faded away, and it sounds like it's needed now more than ever.
Yes, because during that period of time, we had a convergence of various agencies and organizations that were interested in climate change, and we were talking. I don't know, since that time and since that's gone away and not reappeared, I don't know how much conversation is actually being had between the various agencies that need to coordinate in order to help anyone. I certainly agree with what Robin says, is that right now we have to wait for an extreme event to occur to actually intervene. And when we do intervene, there are limitations.
Now, one of the communities that the cabinet worked on was Newtok, and Robin, you've spent a lot of time in Newtok, and like Kivalina, they are in this terrible limbo with things happening quickly around them. Do you worry about communities like Newtok?
I do. Well, that's why I'm so passionate about this issue, because honestly, if any person dies because of an extreme weather event, now this is the time when they're in danger, I don't know how I would live with myself, because their lives are in danger and there are no evacuation routes for those extreme weather events.
And they're kind of unpredictable because sometimes, as you're seeing in this footage here, a fall storm has come and it's just taken away massive chunks of the riverbank in Newtok, and then you can go a while. So how do you think that we should approach this?
Well, it's a really complex issue because there are no relocation guidelines anywhere in the world. And what I mean by that is climate change is affecting our environment in unprecedented ways. And what we need to figure out is at what point in time is a place uninhabitable and needs to think about relocation prior to that extreme weather event, like a hurricane or flooding, coming in and wiping out a community. And again, this isn't just an issue for Alaska. This is an issue for the East Coast.
And so maybe we ought to partner with them and maybe get a little momentum here. Well, I want to thank both of you for joining us, Robin Bronin and Mike Black. And we're going to carry on this conversation on our website so we can get into more detail, because it's an overwhelming issue. So thanks for being with us. And coming up, from Akiak to Barrow, there's not a shortage of stories about climate change. Up next, some photos that you've shared with us, and tracking changes in the environment across the state. You don't have to be a scientist. All it takes is a smartphone.
I just want cremation.
No hidden costs, no add-ons.
Cremation is much more affordable.
Dignified, ecological.
I just want something basic. The simpler, the better.
Cremation sure makes a lot of sense. The Cremation Society of Alaska is now serving families in Anchorage and in the Valley, and we are always on the web at alaskacremation.com. Call us today at 277-2777 or in the Valley 373-8627.
It's not like people are going to come up to you and tell you they're thinking about taking their life. They're feeling alone, they're feeling hopeless, they're feeling lost, unloved.
Those who are suicidal feel alone. Let them know they're not. Ask how they're doing. Check in every day.
I wish I would have called them one more time.
You could save a life. No experience necessary. For support, go to StopSuicideAlaska.org.
Everyone knows the best medicine is a family's love. Fisher House helps provide a home away from home for the families of Alaskan ill and wounded service members. Show your support for the men and women who have made sacrifices for our country. You can make a difference in the lives of our military families by volunteering, hosting a meal, gift cards, or monetary donations. Visit akfisherhouse.org to find out all the ways you can help. Fisher House of Alaska, helping military families in their time of need.
Football games never break out at the office. Hockey games either. Turns out covering sports in Alaska is not for the weak of heart or back. Reading highlights from sports feeds? Easy. Getting the words out at 45 below? Try it sometime. Dave Goldman goes the distance for every Alaska sports fan. Like him. KTVA 11 Sports and Dave Goldman. Be there.
Alaskans may soon be able to report their environmental observations around the state thanks to an app. LEO stands for Local Environmental Observer, developed by the Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium to help communities share information about the weather or the environment, such as bird and fish die-offs. Several groups are working with LEO, including a tribe in Seldovia, a Kachemak Bay community near Homer.
We never really had a lot of people coming in and then, giving information back to the community. A lot of the information would be taken and then left the community. So hopefully with our environmental department being involved with people giving us that information and then being able to share it back to them, I think that's put a lot of trust in people.
Right now, the app is read-only, so only tribal leaders can post information on this network, but the Tribal Health Consortium hopes by the end of this year to make it possible for all Alaskans to have access to this network. Well, we asked for some of your photos documenting what you think might be the result of climate change in your community. And this one comes to us from Mike Williams in Akiak. One evening this September, he was feeding his dog team when the ground started sinking. Mike says his dogs were rescued in the nick of time, and a good thing because that drop-off was about 50 feet. The river claimed about 100 feet of ground. And take a look at this photo from the North Slope Borough. It's a memorial for a famous actor and aviator marking the site of a plane crash in 1935, which took the lives of Will Rogers and Wiley Post. With no sea ice to protect the shoreline from fall storm surges, the monument is only 12 feet from falling into the Arctic Ocean. And finally, this photo is from Brian Adams, part of the Our Story exhibit, which opened at the Anchorage Museum this week, featuring Alaska Native artists. Well, the title of Brian's photo, Children in Newtok, Alaska, Playing on Land Erosion. And you see a boy jumping over a gap in the riverbank, which is about to collapse. The exhibit was curated by Drew Michael, a well-known carver, who asked the artist to explore what it means to be an Alaska Native today. Well, it's time to bring our weekly conversation to a close. Thank you for joining us to explore yet another Alaskan frontier, one with so many unknowns. We'll see you next week.